Welcome to Momentum Mind, the place where your mindset meets action, and where the power of intelligent decision-making can change the way you see success. Here, we dive deep into lessons from timeless books, uncover the strategies that make the difference between chaos and clarity, and guide you step by step through the world of smart thinking and disciplined action. Are you ready to unlock your potential? Let's get started. Chapter 1: The Gatekeeper of Wealth. In the heart of a bustling city, where the streets smelled of freshly baked bread and iron from the old railway, lived a young man named Elias. He had a curious mind and restless eyes that always sought out opportunity, yet his pockets were nearly empty. He watched the merchants in the square, each shouting their wares, some overflowing with gold, others with debt written on scraps of paper. He wondered, how did some people seem to summon wealth as if by magic, while others toiled endlessly and remained hungry? Elias had grown up hearing stories of the gatekeeper, a mysterious figure who, it was said, could teach anyone the art of lasting wealth. The gatekeeper didn't deal in tricks or luck, but in understanding the rhythm of money and the hidden currents that made it grow. Many had sought him, but only a few returned with more than coins jingling in their pockets. One foggy morning, Elias found himself standing in front of a small, weathered building tucked between a tailor's shop and a blacksmith. The sign read simply, "Wisdom for those who dare." He felt a shiver of excitement. Inside, the room was lined with shelves of thick, leather-bound books and strange mechanical devices that ticked and whirred. At the far end, an old man with bright, keen eyes and hands knotted like old tree roots looked up from a ledger. "You seek guidance?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Elias nodded, unsure if he was asking for wisdom or for some secret shortcut to riches. "Not just riches," Elias replied, "but a way to protect and grow what little I have." The gatekeeper studied him quietly, then gestured to a chair. "We begin with understanding two creatures that live in every city like shadows and sunlight. The first is Mr. Market, the other is yourself." Elias tilted his head. "Mr. Market?" "Yes," the old man said, eyes twinkling. "He appears every day. Sometimes he is cheerful, offering opportunities with wide smiles. Other days, he is glum and despondent, willing to sell for almost nothing. You must learn to see him as a reflection of emotion, not truth." For hours, the gatekeeper spoke, showing Elias charts scrawled on paper and piles of colored tokens representing businesses, debts, and treasures. Elias learned that wealth was not a ladder to climb blindly, it was a garden to tend. Patience, discernment, and calm judgment were more potent than impulse or fear. The gatekeeper called this the art of intelligent investing, and it was nothing like the chaotic clamor of the merchants outside. Elias felt a strange mix of awe and unease. Each lesson was clear, yet the responsibility weighed heavily. If he misjudged Mr. Market, he could lose everything. And yet, the promise of understanding the unseen rules of money made his heart pound with excitement. As dusk fell, Elias noticed a shadow slip past the window. A figure, hooded and silent, left a small parchment tucked under the door. On it was a single word: beware. Elias's fingers trembled. Who had sent it? A rival investor? Or a warning from someone who had glimpsed the dangers of the path he now walked? He looked around the room at the shelves, the whirring machines, the faint smell of old paper and candle wax. Tomorrow, he would meet Mr. Market himself and begin testing his first lessons. He could feel the weight of decisions that could either bring prosperity or ruin, and the thought made him restless, unable to sleep. Outside, the city lights flickered like tiny stars, indifferent to the fear and hope of a young man learning to master the currents of wealth, and somewhere, in the shadowed alleys and glittering squares, Mr. Market waited, ready to reveal his true nature. Chapter 2: The Meeting with Mr. Market. Elias woke before dawn, the city still wrapped in a soft grey fog. His mind buzzed with questions, each one heavier than the last. The gatekeeper had spoken of Mr. Market, but it was one thing to imagine him and another to face him in the flesh, or, at least, in the form the city believed he took. By mid-morning, Elias found himself standing in the bustling square where merchants, bankers, and speculators crowded together, shouting prices, waving papers, and counting coins. The air smelled of roasted nuts, iron, and the faint tang of money in motion. And then he saw him, a man with a wide grin that never quite reached his eyes, moving quickly from one person to another, offering treasures, bargains, and promises with equal enthusiasm. "This is Mr. Market," the gatekeeper had said, and now Elias understood why. The man seemed unpredictable, almost alive in a way that was unsettling. One moment, he was exuberant, waving golden papers and promising fortunes that seemed too good to be true. The next, he sulked and begged someone to sell for half the price he had offered the day before. People followed him like leaves in a stream, swept along by his moods. Elias stepped closer, feeling a mixture of fear and fascination. "Excuse me," he said cautiously. "I'd like to understand what you offer." Mr. Market stopped, looked him up and down, and laughed. "Ah, a young seeker. I have everything you could ever want. Rare treasures, businesses, coins, opportunities, and they are all yours, if you act quickly." Elias remembered the gatekeeper's warning. Mr. Market's excitement and despair were emotions, not truths. He took a deep breath, imagining himself as a calm observer rather than a participant. "I don't want to rush," he said. "I want to know what is real, what lasts." The man's face twisted, his grin faltering. "Real? Lasting? My dear boy, the world is changing every hour. Everything I offer is fleeting." And then, almost instantly, he brightened again, thrusting a golden paper into Elias's hand. "But take this one. You'll never see an opportunity like it again." Elias examined the paper. It represented a small merchant shop in a distant part of the city, a business that seemed stable, with customers who returned day after day. The numbers and scribbles suggested growth, yet the price Mr. Market demanded seemed inflated, riding the wave of his own excitement. Elias felt a flutter of fear. What if he refused and the price soared? What if he accepted and it fell? He recalled the gatekeeper's words, "Do not let emotion dictate your choices. Observe, analyze, and wait for the right moment." With a steady hand, he thanked Mr. Market and stepped aside, letting the crowd rush past him, some eager to chase the excitement, others frozen in fear. For the next hours, Elias wandered the square, observing Mr. Market's patterns. He noticed that the man was not truly omnipotent. He was guided by sentiment, rumor, and fear. People who followed him blindly were either swept to wealth or dragged into ruin, their fortunes rising and falling like ships on a stormy sea. Elias realized that Mr. Market was a mirror, showing the city's emotions rather than absolute truth. Later, Elias returned to the gatekeeper, paper in hand. "He changes every moment," he said. "How am I supposed to know what is real?" The gatekeeper's eyes glimmered. "You don't. Not at first. But here is what matters: you must learn to see opportunity when it aligns with your judgment, not when Mr. Market demands it. Treat him as a partner in information, not a master of destiny." Elias nodded, but uncertainty gnawed at him. That night, as he walked home along cobblestone streets slick with evening rain, he imagined Mr. Market following him, whispering promises of riches, threats of loss. The city seemed different now, every shadow a temptation, every shining window a chance for gain or disaster. And then he noticed a faint glow behind a narrow alley, almost like a beacon. Curiosity pulled him closer, and he found a small shop he had never seen before. Its sign was plain: the keeper of records. Inside, stacks of papers and ledgers covered every surface. A soft, otherworldly light seemed to emanate from the floorboards themselves. A voice called from the back, deep and calm. "I see you have met Mr. Market," it said. Elias froze. "And you have questions? That is good. But if you are to survive what comes next, you must understand the truth behind the numbers and the shadow of the unseen risk." Elias stepped closer, heart pounding. The keeper of records beckoned him to a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. "All who wish to attain wealth must walk here," the voice continued. "Few return unchanged." Elias hesitated, looking back toward the glowing city above, alive with chaos and promise. Then he took a deep breath and descended into the shadows. The air grew colder, damp with secrets long buried, and the faint hum of ancient ledgers and magical machines seemed to welcome him. He knew that below, in that hidden place, he would face the reality of risk, and perhaps discover a power no ordinary investor possessed. But as he reached the bottom, the candles flickered, and he saw a ledger open on a pedestal, with words that seemed to shift as he looked at them. And then a whisper brushed against his ear: "Not everything can be counted, yet all can be lost." Elias's stomach twisted. He had thought he understood Mr. Market. He had thought he was prepared. But the real test, one that could make or break him, was just beginning. Chapter 3: The Shadow of Risk. Elias emerged from the narrow staircase into a room that felt more like a cavern than a library. The walls were lined with towering shelves, each packed with ledgers, charts, and strange mechanical devices that hummed like distant storms. The air smelled faintly of ink, dust, and something metallic, as if the building itself had absorbed centuries of wealth and lost. At the center of the room stood the keeper of records, a figure cloaked in grey, with eyes sharp and knowing. "Welcome," the keeper said, his voice echoing softly. "You have met Mr. Market, seen his moods, and felt the thrill of opportunity. But now, you must face something more dangerous: the shadow of risk." Elias stepped closer. "I thought I understood risk. You watch prices, judge businesses, isn't that enough?" The keeper shook his head slowly. "No. Risk is not always visible. It hides behind numbers, whispers in rumors, and waits in the spaces between certainty and greed. A wise investor does not chase the glittering prize blindly. He builds defenses, learns patience, and measures the ground beneath his feet. He gestured to a long table where dozens of small, glass spheres floated in midair. Each one contained a tiny, moving city, streets filled with people, markets alive with merchants, and shops glowing with lantern light. These, said the keeper, are reflections of real ventures. Each one has value, potential, and hidden danger. Your task is to observe them, predict their resilience, and decide which to trust. Elias's eyes widened. Are these alive? In a sense, the keeper replied. They respond to decisions, to mistakes, to patience and greed. Some crumble with a single careless move, others endure storms and grow stronger. Notice patterns, but remember, nothing is guaranteed. That is the essence of risk. Elias leaned forward, watching a small city crumble as one of the floating spheres tilted slightly. Buildings toppled, merchants ran in panic, and coins scattered like autumn leaves. What caused this? He asked. Human error, said the keeper. Overconfidence, impatience, or neglect. Some investors fail because they ignore the warning signs. Others because they follow Mr. Market's moods instead of their own judgment. He handed Elias a blank sheet of parchment and a quill. You will make your first decisions now. Select 3 cities to invest in. Observe their strengths, weaknesses, and potential. And remember, there is always a margin, a cushion between what you risk and what you can safely endure. Elias hesitated. His mind raced, recalling the golden paper Mr. Market had offered. His gut told him to pick the brightest, most exciting spheres, the ones that promised rapid growth. But the keeper's words echoed, patience, observation, cushion, margin. He touched the first sphere gently. It was a modest city, unremarkable, its street steady but not flashy. He could see that its merchants returned daily customers, its buildings were solid, and the people were disciplined in trade. A sense of quiet stability washed over him. He marked it on his parchment. The second sphere shimmered with golden lights, glittering towers rising high above the streets. It promised grandeur and wealth beyond imagination. Yet Elias noticed cracks along the foundations. Some of the merchants hurried, looking anxious. Excitement tempted him, but he resisted, recalling the keeper's warning. He noted it cautiously, deciding to observe rather than leap. The third sphere was hidden in shadow, a city no taller than a single block, simple and unassuming. Its people worked steadily, seemingly unaware of the grandeur around them. But when a storm of swirling mist hit the sphere, it did not falter. Its buildings held, the streets remained orderly, and the merchants continued trading calmly. Elias's eyes widened. This was a city resilient to chaos, yet easy to overlook. He marked it with care. The keeper studied him. You are learning the first principle. Intelligence in investing is more about protection than excitement. Many chase the dazzling city and are ruined by its sudden collapse. Few notice the quiet, resilient city that grows steadily through storms. That is why we speak of the margin of safety, the space that cushions against unforeseen disasters. Elias felt a thrill, but also unease. He had never considered that the greatest danger was not the obvious risk, but the hidden one. And now he understood why Mr. Market's moods could be so misleading. He had watched traders panic, wealth vanish, and fortunes rise only to fall again. The lesson was clear: to survive, he had to see beyond appearances, beyond the glitter, and focus on what could endure. Hours passed as he studied the spheres, noting patterns and vulnerabilities. The floating city shifted in response to unseen forces, storms, fires, sudden plagues, testing his judgment and patience. Each mistake he made, even a small one, caused minor destruction, and Elias felt the sting of responsibility. Yet each careful observation revealed the power of cautious, intelligent choices. Finally, as twilight descended and the first lamps in the cavern flickered to life, the keeper approached. You have done well, he said. But the real world is not confined to these spheres. Mr. Market's chaos waits outside. Tomorrow, you will invest in the city beyond this room, where fortunes and failures mingle freely. And you will see that even the strongest judgment must face tests far harsher than these controlled trials. Elias's heart pounded. He had taken his first steps in understanding risk and margin of safety, yet he sensed the challenge ahead would be unlike anything he had imagined. Outside the cavern, the city pulsed with noise, greed, and ambition. Somewhere, Mr. Market waited, ready to tempt, mislead, or betray, and in the shadows, behind the flickering street lamps, Elias noticed a figure watching him, a stranger with a notebook, scribbling furiously and vanishing before he could be confronted. Elias felt a chill. The path he had chosen was no longer only about learning, it was about surviving, seeing through illusions, and discovering whether intelligence could truly protect him when the world tested every choice. Chapter 4. The first gamble. The morning sun spilled gold across the city's cobblestones, but the light brought little warmth to Elias. He clutched his parchment tightly, the marked spheres of the keeper of records burned in his mind like memories of a dream. Today, he would leave the cavern of lessons and step into the open city, where wealth and ruin danced side by side, and where Mr. Market's mood shaped fortunes with alarming speed. The square was alive with energy. Merchants shouted, coins clinked, and traders waved papers as if conducting some grand orchestra. Among them, Elias noticed familiar faces, some jovial, some anxious, all caught in the pull of opportunity. Yet the stranger he had glimpsed yesterday lingered at the edge of the crowd, had pulled low, scribbling in his notebook before vanishing again. He remembered the keeper's words: observe, measure, protect. Your first Retelling test begins now. Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle like armor on his shoulders. He had studied the spheres, understood resilience, and learned the importance of the margin of safety. But now, theory met reality, and the city beyond the cavern was merciless in its lessons. Elias approached a modest merchant, whose small shop glimmered with promise. The shop sold simple but essential goods, tools, cloth, and food that people needed regardless of market whims. I wish to invest, Elias said, heart pounding. The merchant raised an eyebrow but nodded. Coins exchanged hands, agreements were scribbled on parchment, and Elias felt a strange surge of excitement and fear. And nearby, he saw traders chasing more dazzling opportunities. One man bought shares in a towering guild whose towers sparkled like crystal in the morning sun. Another woman leaped on an offer from a merchant promising riches in distant lands. Mr. Market hovered over them all, laughing, cajoling, and frowning in quick succession. His emotions shaped the price of every transaction, the rise and fall of every fortune. Elias watched carefully, resisting the urge to mimic the crowd. He remembered the smallest sphere from the keeper's cavern, the quiet, resilient city that endured storms. He focused on stability, observing the shop, its customers, and the merchant's steady habits. For now, he waited, learning more from restraint than action. Hours passed, and the city's rhythm revealed itself. Some investments soared briefly, only to collapse when rumors spread or excitement waned. Others remained steady, growing slowly but surely. Elias felt both anxiety and fascination as he tracked the changes. He realized that wealth was not a single explosion of gain but a careful accumulation, nurtured like a garden, protected from storms, and measured with patience. By midday, a sudden commotion drew his attention. Mr. Market appeared at the center of the square, his face twisted in exaggerated panic. Everything is failing. Sell. Sell now before it's too late. Traders scattered, abandoning even the strongest ventures, and chaos spread like wildfire. Coins spilled, papers fluttered, and cries of fear pierced the air. Elias felt his stomach twist. The golden glow of opportunity threatened to blind him, yet he remembered the keeper's lessons. He took a deep breath and observed. The modest merchant shop remained steady, customers still came, the doors stayed open, and the shelves were full. Unlike the glittering guilds that crumbled in panic, this venture showed resilience. He resisted the instinct to flee with the crowd, holding his position. Traders around him were losing fortunes, driven by emotion, by Mr. Market's dramatic display. And yet, Elias saw calm and steadiness prosper. By evening, the panic subsided. Prices for the glittering towers collapsed, while the modest shop continued quietly, slowly increasing in value as people returned to necessities. Elias felt a strange mixture of relief and pride. He had survived his first real test, not through speed or daring, but through patience, observation, and restraint. He had begun to understand the secret the gatekeeper had hinted at: true strength lay not in chasing brilliance, but in choosing wisely, protecting what mattered, and waiting for storms to pass. Yet the city was not done testing him. As night fell, a shadow slipped across the square. The hooded stranger appeared once more, this time leaving a small, folded note near Elias's feet. Hands trembling, Elias picked it up. The words were simple, written in neat, precise letters: beware the sirens of greed. They promise much but steal more. Elias's pulse quickened. He glanced around, but the stranger had vanished into the darkness. The city seemed different now, more alive, more dangerous, and more mysterious. He realized that knowledge alone was not enough. Vigilance, discipline, and courage would be tested at every turn. As he returned to his small room that night, coins tucked safely in his pocket, Elias could not shake a sense of unease. Mr. Market had shown his temper, the glittering towers had fallen, and yet opportunities remained. Somewhere, hidden beyond the city's glowing lamps and crowded streets, greater challenges awaited, ventures that could make him rich or ruin him entirely. And as Elias drifted into restless sleep, he dreamed of a city floating in shadow, its streets alive with whispers of hidden risk. The note's warning echoed in his mind, the sirens of greed were real, and they had only begun to sing. Chapter 5, The Art of Defense. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of bread from the bakeries and smoke from the blacksmith's forges. Elias walked through the city square, coins in his pocket, parchment clutched tight, and the note from the hooded stranger still whispering in his mind, "Beware the sirens of greed." The events of the previous day haunted him, the panic, the collapse of glittering towers, the chaos unleashed by Mr. Market's whims. Yet amid the disorder, he had glimpsed something invaluable: stability, resilience, and the quiet power of patience. He made his way to the gatekeeper's building, the small sign above the door swaying gently in the wind. Inside, the familiar scent of old paper and ink welcomed him, along with the soft hum of the strange machines that lined the walls. The gatekeeper was seated at his desk, eyes closed, as if measuring the city's pulse from afar. "You have seen Mr. Market's fury," the gatekeeper said without looking up. "And you have survived. But surviving is not enough. You must learn to defend what you hold and protect it from forces beyond your control." Elias nodded. "I thought I understood risk, but yesterday showed me how easily the crowd can be swept by emotion. How do I protect myself?" The gatekeeper gestured to a large map spread across the table, marked with tiny colored tokens representing ventures throughout the city. "The first principle of defense," he said, "is balance. Do not put all your wealth into one venture, no matter how dazzling it appears. The world is unpredictable. The strongest investments are those that can endure storms, mistakes, and sudden panics." He picked up a token representing the modest shop Elias had invested in and placed it next to others that were smaller, less noticeable. "Diversify," he said. "Spread your resources across ventures with different strengths. Some will weather storms, some will grow slowly, some will offer opportunities when others fail. By doing so, you protect yourself from the chaos of Mr. Market's moods." Elias leaned over the map, tracing his fingers along the lines connecting the tokens. Each venture had its own story, its own risks, and its own potential rewards. He could feel the energy of the city in his hands, the push and pull of fortune, the rhythm of growth and decline. "And what about the glittering opportunities?" he asked. "The ones that promise rapid gains?" The gatekeeper's gaze sharpened. "Those are the sirens of greed," he said. "They sing sweetly, promising glory and riches. But they hide hidden dangers. The faster a venture rises, the faster it can fall. Many are lured by excitement and swept into ruin. You must learn to observe without succumbing to temptation. Excitement is not intelligence." He handed Elias a small, leather-bound book. "This contains records of past ventures, both successful and failed. Study them. Look for patterns. Notice how panic spreads, how overconfidence destroys, and how restraint preserves. Knowledge is your first line of defense." Elias spent hours poring over the pages, noting the mistakes of others, the signs of hidden risk, and the ventures that endured despite storms. He began to see the invisible threads connecting events, rumors, and choices. Each decision in the city, each rise and fall, was part of a larger rhythm. The key was not to predict every movement but to prepare for uncertainty. Late in the afternoon, a sudden noise at the window drew his attention. Mr. Market had appeared outside, flamboyant and theatrical, offering ventures that glittered like gold. Traders pressed against him, desperate for his attention. Elias felt the familiar pull of excitement, the tug of potential riches. But he remembered the lesson: protection over thrill, intelligence over impulse. He watched quietly, observing which ventures withstood scrutiny and which collapsed under emotion. By evening, Elias had adjusted his investments, spreading resources across ventures that offered resilience rather than spectacle. The glittering towers crashed once more, their traders' cries echoing through the square, but Elias's holdings remained steady. Relief and satisfaction coursed through him, but a lingering unease remained. Mr. Market had not finished testing him, and the sirens of greed were patient hunters, waiting for a moment of weakness. As he left the gatekeeper's building, the city seemed to hum with hidden tension. In the shadows of the alleys, coins changed hands in secret, deals were whispered behind closed doors, and fortunes shifted with alarming speed. Elias realized that defense was not a one-time act but a constant vigilance, a shield that must be reinforced daily, and a mind that must remain calm amidst chaos. That night, Elias returned to his small room, exhausted but alert. He examined his investments by candlelight, making notes, adjusting strategies, and imagining the waves of fortune and misfortune that could wash over the city. Then, from a crack in the window, a small, folded note slipped inside. It was written in the same neat, precise hand as before: "Even the strongest walls can crumble if you ignore the winds of change." Elias felt a chill. He had learned to defend, to balance, to protect, but the city was alive, unpredictable, and relentless. Tomorrow, he would face choices that could either fortify his understanding or shatter his growing confidence. The challenge was no longer theoretical. The real test awaited, and with it, the true nature of Mr. Market, risk, and human greed would be revealed, and somewhere in the darkened streets, beyond the lantern glow, the hooded observer watched, waiting for Elias to make his next move. Chapter 6, The Trial of Emotions. The sun had barely risen when Elias stepped into the city square, the familiar hum of commerce greeting him like an old, unpredictable friend. He carried with him the lessons of the gatekeeper, the margins of safety he had calculated, and the knowledge that balance and protection could weather storms. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a storm of another kind churned, one not measured by coins or ledgers, but by heart and mind. He saw Mr. Market immediately, a whirlwind of motion and sound. His eyes sparkled with delight one moment and flickered with panic the next. In his hands, he waved sheets of parchment that promised sudden wealth, new ventures, and once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Traders jostled each other, shouting prices and rumors, swept along by Mr. Market's moods like leaves in a torrent. Elias felt a familiar pull, the tug of excitement and fear. A venture gleamed before him, a shining guild that promised fast returns, glittering towers rising higher than any other in the city. He had observed it for days, noting its growth and potential, but also its instability. Traders were buying with abandon, driven by hope, greed, and a hint of panic. He recalled the keeper's lessons: do not let emotion dictate your choices. Observe, analyze, wait for the right moment. But as he hesitated, he felt his pulse quicken. What if he missed the chance? What if his careful patience left him behind while others soared? The voices of fear and desire pressed on him, whispering promises and threats in equal measure. A sudden cheer erupted in the crowd. The guild's towers had soared even higher in the last hour, and traders rushed to follow the momentum. Elias's hand trembled. He knew that joining now meant buying at the peak of enthusiasm, at a moment of extreme vulnerability. Yet he also knew that resisting meant watching others grow rich while he remained steady. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to separate his judgment from his emotions. Slowly, he made his decision. Not to chase the glittering guild, but to adjust his other holdings slightly, reinforcing investments that had shown resilience in storms. He felt a pang of fear and regret, but he held firm. Minutes later, chaos erupted. A rumor swept through the square: an unexpected debt, a failed venture in a distant city, and the guild's towers began to falter. Traders screamed, selling at a loss, coins clattering like falling rain. Mr. Market's moods twisted from ecstasy to despair in moments. Those who had chased excitement were caught in the storm, losing wealth faster than they had gained it. Elias watched silently, heart pounding, as his decision proved sound. Relief washed over him, but it was mingled with a strange realization: the city, Mr. Market, and human greed were unpredictable forces, capable of unsettling even the most prepared. Emotional discipline was not a single act but a constant struggle, a battle between desire and reason that could never truly end. As the square settled into uneasy quiet, a small voice called from a nearby alley. A young trader, pale and trembling, approached Elias. I lost everything," he stammered. "I thought I could beat Mr. Market. I followed the crowd." His hand shook, clutching empty purses and crumpled parchment. "How did you?" Elias hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I watched," he said finally. "I did not follow the noise or the excitement. I protected what I could, and I waited." The young trader's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I had known. I wish I had patience." He turned and ran back into the crowd, leaving Elias alone in the fading sunlight. The lesson was bitter yet real: intelligence without emotional control was fragile, and the human mind could be as dangerous as any market. Elias wandered the streets, feeling the weight of the city's lessons pressing on him. He thought of the quiet, resilient spheres in the keeper's cavern and the modest merchant shop that had survived the first panic. He realized that real success required more than knowledge of numbers or markets. It required mastery over fear and hope, the ability to remain steady when others were swept away by emotion. As night fell, a chill crept through the streets. The hooded observer appeared again, slipping a small note into Elias's pocket. Wisdom is only half the journey. The other half is temperance. Elias's pulse quickened. He understood that even the most intelligent investor could fail if emotions ruled decisions. Returning to his small room, he reviewed his investments by candlelight. The guild's towers had collapsed, the glittering venture gone, and the panic still lingered in the city's pulse. He adjusted his holdings, reinforcing those that were steady, mindful that the next test might be even harsher. Yet as he closed his eyes, the unease remained. Mr. Market's moods were relentless, unpredictable, and ever-present. The city held dangers unseen, and the sirens of greed sang sweetly, waiting for any lapse of discipline. Tomorrow promised another trial, one that would test not just his judgment, but his courage and resolve in the face of real loss. And somewhere in the shadows, the hooded observer's pen scratched across parchment, recording every choice, every hesitation, every flicker of fear or hope in the mind of the young man who dared to tame wealth. Chapter 7. The Fork in the Path. The city awoke under a pale, misty sun, its streets already alive with the familiar clamor of merchants, traders, and the ever-present Mr. Market. Elias walked through the square, sensing that the lessons of the past days had changed him. The panic, the glittering towers, the collapse of fortunes, all had left their mark. He felt steadier, more observant, but also aware that his journey was far from over. The gatekeeper awaited him in the back room of the small building, leaning over a map covered with tiny tokens representing ventures across the city. "You have learned the first principles: patience, risk awareness, emotional control," he said. "Now comes a choice. There are two paths for those who seek to grow wealth, one of cautious defense, the other of enterprising pursuit. Both can succeed, but each demands a different mind." Elias frowned. "Two paths?" "Yes," said the gatekeeper. "The defensive path is for those who value security above excitement. You invest in ventures that are resilient, predictable, and steady. Your goal is preservation and gradual growth. The enterprising path is for those willing to take calculated risks, seeking higher returns through careful research, observation, and courage. But the rewards come with the danger of loss." He gestured to two sets of tokens. The first set represented modest shops, essential services, and stable merchants. The second set shimmered with glittering guilds, experimental ventures, and new enterprises brimming with promise but prone to collapse. "Choose your focus," the gatekeeper said. "Or, if you are skilled, blend the paths, but understand, each requires discipline and a clear mind." Elias felt the weight of the choice pressing on him. He remembered the Golden Guild, the panic, the glittering promises, and the sirens of greed. And yet, he also saw the opportunities in steady ventures, the quiet growth that had survived storms. His mind spun, imagining the two paths as rivers flowing side by side, one calm and deep, the other wild and fast. He began, then paused. "Can I do both?" The gatekeeper's eyes gleamed. "Some can. But few have the patience and skill to navigate both without being swept away. The city tests those who try to chase both paths. You must decide how to allocate your resources, your time, and your attention. Each choice will have consequences." Elias left the building, the tokens from the map imagined in his mind. He wandered the square, observing the bustling traders, the shouts of Mr. Market, and the constant flow of opportunity and risk. He saw enterprising investors darting from one glittering venture to the next, chasing excitement and quick gains. Some succeeded, at least for a time, their faces alight with triumph. Others faltered, panic spreading as suddenly as joy had come. He also noticed the defensive investors, calm and steady, moving deliberately, inspecting small shops, noting consistent trade, and resisting the pull of flamboyant promises. They seemed invisible to the crowd, yet over time, their holdings grew quietly, protected from the chaos around them. Elias realized that choosing a path was not merely about money, it was about temperament, discipline, and understanding the unseen currents of human behavior. The city rewarded courage, but it punished recklessness. It offered wealth, but only to those who respected its hidden rules. He made his first allocations carefully. Most of his resources went to resilient ventures, while a smaller portion was dedicated to promising, enterprising opportunities. He watched as Mr. Market swirled through the square, reacting to moods, rumors, and fear. Yet Elias's decisions remained steady. He could feel the tension in his mind, the subtle battle between desire and reason, hope and caution. As evening fell, a sudden uproar erupted near the glittering guilds. A venture collapsed, wealth vanished in an instant, and the enterprising investors who had overreached were thrown into panic. Elias watched, heart pounding, as his smaller, calculated investments weathered the storm. Relief mingled with a strange realization: even careful blending of paths required vigilance. One misstep, one lapse in judgment, and the city could swallow him whole. That night, as he returned to his room, a note appeared on his doorstep. It was from the hooded observer, written in the same precise hand: "Paths are chosen, but the journey tests more than wealth. It tests courage, discipline, and clarity. One wrong step can echo far beyond the moment." Elias felt a shiver. The lesson was clear: choosing a path was only the beginning. The city, Mr. Market, and human emotion were relentless. Success required more than intelligence; it demanded constant awareness, adaptability, and the ability to remain steady when others were swept away by panic or temptation. And somewhere in the square, amid flickering lanterns and the restless hum of traders, the glittering guilds and modest shops waited, silent and patient, as the city prepared for the next test. Elias knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions that could shape his fortune, and lessons that could not be learned from books or maps alone. Chapter 8. The first collapse. The morning air carried a tense stillness, unusual for the city that never truly slept. Elias walked through the square, observing the familiar chaos with a careful, steady gaze. Mr. Market flitted from one group of traders to another, his mood shifting like storm clouds, and the city's pulse seemed to thrum faster than usual. A sense of unease clung to the air, faint but unmistakable, whispering warnings to those who dared to listen. Elias checked his holdings, reviewing his careful allocations between the stable ventures and the smaller portion of enterprising investments. For days, his strategy had held steady. He had resisted the sirens of greed, observed without emotion, and maintained the margin of safety the keeper had insisted upon. Yet today felt different. The wind of change was not subtle; it roared in sudden gusts of rumor, panic, and unseen misfortune. It began with a whisper: a merchant's guild in a distant part of the city had failed unexpectedly. Traders reacted swiftly, fear cascading like a wave. Prices tumbled for ventures that had seemed secure. Even some of Elias's enterprising investments wavered as panic spread beyond their immediate influence. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He had prepared for storms, yet this felt like a tempest. The glittering guilds, once symbols of dazzling opportunity, collapsed spectacularly. Coins scattered, papers flew, and the crowd's cries filled the square. Mr. Market's voice rose and fell with the chaos, one moment desperate, the next triumphant, feeding the frenzy as traders scrambled blindly. Elias stood apart, holding his parchment, heart pounding. He had made measured choices, but even so, he could feel loss creeping toward him. One of his enterprising ventures, a small but promising guild, was caught in the storm. Its towers, which had seemed resilient, wavered under the weight of panic and rumor. He watched helplessly as traders sold, values plummeted, and his carefully calculated portion of wealth diminished. The sting of failure cut sharply. He had thought himself prepared. He had calculated margins of safety, diversified holdings, and controlled emotion. And yet, even with intelligence and patience, he had been touched by the city's relentless chaos. The lesson was brutal: in the world of investing, losses were inevitable, and even the wise could not escape them entirely. As he retreated to a quieter street, Elias encountered a trader who had lost everything in the same collapse. The man's face was pale, eyes wide with shock. "I thought I had control," he muttered. "I followed my instincts, I followed the crowd, and it all vanished." Elias nodded, feeling a mixture of sympathy and unease. "Even preparation cannot erase risk entirely," he said softly. "But it can limit it and allow you to recover." He returned to his small room, sitting by the candlelight, reviewing every choice, every allocation, every decision that had led to partial loss. He realized that mistakes were not shameful, they were inevitable. What mattered was understanding why they occurred, learning from them, and reinforcing defenses for the future. A knock at the window startled him. Outside, the hooded observer handed a small, folded note that landed silently on his desk. Elias opened it carefully. The words were crisp and deliberate: "Loss is not failure, if wisdom is gained. The city tests those who endure, not those who stumble. Learn, adapt, survive." Elias's hand shook slightly, but he felt a flicker of determination. He understood now that intelligence was not simply about avoiding mistakes; it was about seeing them clearly, understanding their causes, and using that knowledge to make better choices. The loss of the enterprising guild was painful, yet it was a teacher, showing the harsh reality of volatility and the importance of resilience. The city outside seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath after the storm. Mr. Market had disappeared from the square, leaving traders to regroup and re-evaluate. The glittering towers had fallen, the panicked merchants scurried, and only those with steady minds remained to rebuild. Elias stepped into the streets, feeling the weight of the lesson pressing down on him, yet also a strange sense of clarity. Tomorrow would bring another opportunity, another test. He had learned patience, discipline, and the importance of margin. Now he had learned humility, the realization that even intelligence cannot make one immune to the unpredictable currents of human emotion and market chaos. And somewhere, in the shadowed alleys where coins and papers exchanged hands in silence, the hooded observer watched, recording every flicker of doubt, every careful decision, and every lesson earned in the crucible of the city. Elias understood one thing clearly: surviving the first collapse was only the beginning. The true mastery of wealth, he sensed, lay in enduring many such trials without surrendering to fear or temptation. Chapter 9, Lessons from the Veterans. The morning sun fell unevenly across the city square, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like silent watchers over the bustling crowd. Elias walked among the traders, feeling the sting of yesterday's collapse still fresh in his mind. The glittering guilds had crumbled, some enterprising ventures had faltered, and yet, a few resilient holdings had remained steady. The lessons of risk, emotional control, and the limits of intelligence pressed upon him. Today, he hoped to find guidance beyond his own observations. Word had reached him of a gathering of veteran investors, those who had endured the city's chaos for decades. They were known for their calm demeanor, their ability to navigate Mr. Market's moods, and their uncanny skill in surviving storms that ruined younger traders. Elias felt both excitement and nervousness. He longed to see how experience could shape judgment, how wisdom might temper emotion. The gathering took place in an old, stone-lined hall near the river. The walls were etched with the names of ventures that had risen and fallen over generations. Inside, seasoned traders moved with quiet purpose, discussing strategies, analyzing trends, and occasionally glancing at the square through tall windows, watching Mr. Market flit between groups of eager young traders. Elias approached the largest table, where 3 veteran investors sat today. Their faces bore lines of age and thought, eyes sharp and measured. One, a woman with silver streaks in her hair, smiled warmly. "You are young," she said. "You have survived your first collapse, yes?" Elias nodded. "I have. And I want to learn how to endure beyond the first storm, how to grow steadily without being swept away by excitement or fear." The woman leaned back, fingers interlaced. "Then you must understand the balance between defense and enterprise. Many fail because they chase excitement too early, or protect too rigidly and never seize opportunity. The city rewards those who observe, learn, and act deliberately." She gestured to the table, where parchment maps and ledgers were spread. "Here are records of ventures over decades. Note which survived storms, which grew steadily, and which fell spectacularly. The patterns are not always obvious, but they are consistent. Careful judgment, diversification, and patience are as valuable as courage and insight." Elias leaned in, eyes scanning the records. He saw small shops that had grown slowly over decades, surviving economic storms that had toppled glittering guilds. He saw daring investments that had soared, some for brief moments, others for years, but always with risk carefully managed. The veteran spoke of observing Mr. Market without being swayed, of using knowledge to guide decisions rather than emotion. One of the veterans, a man with a lined, sun-darkened face, leaned forward. "Remember this: the greatest danger is overconfidence. Even the strongest judgment can be undone by greed or impatience. The city is relentless, and Mr. Market is never fully predictable. What matters is your discipline: protect what is safe, explore what is promising, but always respect the unknown." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of their experience. For the first time, he began to see the long game, the slow accumulation of wealth, the patient nurturing of ventures, the careful blend of security and opportunity. Intelligence alone was insufficient; it had to be paired with judgment honed by observation, discipline, and humility. Hours passed as they discussed strategies, shared tales of collapse and triumph, and dissected past decisions. Elias felt a sense of clarity building, a framework for navigating the city's chaos. He understood that surviving the first collapse had been only a test of endurance. Now, he was learning the art of growth, the steady, disciplined accumulation of wealth through intelligence, observation, and courage. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the veterans rose to leave, leaving Elias with a sense of both inspiration and unease. He had seen how experience tempered judgment, but he also realized that no amount of knowledge could make one immune to sudden storms. Mr. Market remained unpredictable, the city ever alive with risk, and human greed a constant undercurrent. On his way back to his room, Elias noticed the familiar figure of the hooded observer in a shadowed corner. A folded note landed silently in his hand: "Wisdom without practice is fragile. Observe, act, endure. The path ahead tests patience more than brilliance." Elias tucked the note into his pocket and glanced at the city square, lit by lanterns and alive with whispered deals. He felt the pulse of opportunity and danger intertwined, the promise of growth tempered by the memory of collapse. He understood, perhaps more clearly than ever, that intelligent investing was not a single skill or act; it was a continuous journey of observation, judgment, patience, and courage, yet even as he felt strengthened by the veteran's lessons, a whisper of unease remained. Somewhere beyond the flickering lanterns, in the hidden corners of the square, new ventures were forming, glittering and tempting. Mr. Market's mood shifted unpredictably, and the sirens of greed, though faint, were beginning to sing again. Elias realized the truth: the journey had only just begun, and the city still held lessons that would test every ounce of discipline and courage he had gathered. Chapter 10. The long game. The city moved like a living organism, a constant ebb and flow of trade, opportunity, and hidden danger. Elias walked through its streets with a sense of purpose that had been absent in his early days. Gone was the naive excitement of first encounters with Mr. Market, replaced by a measured attention to patterns, behavior, and the subtle signs of change. He had endured collapse, learned from veterans, and begun to understand that wealth was less about sudden triumphs and more about the steady rhythm of wise decisions. He began to apply what the gatekeeper and the veteran investors had taught him. Each morning, he reviewed his holdings, not with anxiety, but with careful observation. He watched the performance of the resilient shops, the minor enterprising ventures, and the occasional opportunity that glittered just enough to merit attention without overwhelming risk. He adjusted, rebalanced, and planned, always mindful of the margin of safety that had protected him in the past. Market appeared as usual, flitting from one group of traders to another, his expressions a mirror of the city's collective mood. At times he was jubilant, offering new ventures with animated gestures; at others, he was despondent, slumping in defeat. Elias observed, rather than reacting. The sirens of greed hummed softly, tempting him to chase excitement, but he resisted, focusing instead on long-term stability. One afternoon, he ventured to a section of the square where enterprising ventures were concentrated. A new guild had appeared, its towers glittering with promise. Traders rushed forward, coins clinking, papers changing hands with feverish speed. Elias paused, analyzing the venture. He noted its strengths: experienced merchants, a unique service, steady customers, but also the risks: untested supply lines, a dependence on fleeting trends, and the unpredictable whims of Mr. Market. He decided to invest a small portion, just enough to test the waters without jeopardizing his core holdings. He watched as others poured in, their enthusiasm pushing the price higher, some blindly following the glitter. Within hours, rumors began to circulate: competition in a distant city, unexpected supply shortages. The venture wavered, yet Elias's cautious allocation limited his exposure. While some traders panicked, he observed calmly, learning more about the subtle currents that influenced outcomes. Evening fell, and Elias returned to the quiet of his room. He reviewed his notes, tracing cause and effect, considering patterns, and adjusting strategies. He realized that intelligence alone was not enough. The long game required patience, discipline, and an understanding that losses were inevitable but manageable. The city had taught him to endure, and now it was teaching him to grow, yet the challenges of emotional discipline persisted. One night, a particularly bright venture appeared on the square, promising rapid gains far beyond anything Elias had seen. Traders pressed and shoved, coins changed hands at dizzying speeds, and the glitter of potential wealth dazzled the eye. Elias felt the familiar tug of temptation, a whisper in his mind that he could take a risk, gain enormous wealth, and test his skill in an exciting new arena. He remembered the lessons: the first collapse, the veteran's advice, the margin of safety, and the quiet resilience of modest investments. He took a deep breath, analyzed the venture carefully, and allocated only a small portion of his resources, enough to participate without exposing himself to ruin. Even so, he felt the tension in his chest, the pull of greed and fear combined. The night ended with lessons etched deep in his mind. Some ventures thrived, others faltered, and Mr. Market continued his unpredictable dance. Elias's cautious strategies had held, and the blend of defense and enterprise began to show results. Slowly, his wealth and confidence grew, nurtured not by chance but by the deliberate application of intelligence, patience, and observation. As he walked home, the city lanterns reflecting in puddles from the evening rain, a folded note appeared on the stone steps before him. He opened it carefully. The long game rewards those who endure. But the next trial will test not wealth, but judgment itself. Observe closely, act wisely, and never forget that the city has eyes everywhere. Elias shivered slightly. The city, the ventures, and Mr. Market were no longer merely sources of opportunity, they were teachers, relentless and impartial. Each decision carried consequences, each choice a reflection of his understanding and discipline. He understood now that the long game was not measured in days or weeks, but in consistent, intelligent action that could weather storms, resist temptation, and grow steadily over time. And somewhere in the shadows, beyond the flickering lights and murmuring streets, the hooded observer scribbled once more, recording each step, each choice, and the quiet evolution of a young man learning to master not only the currents of wealth but the rhythms of the human heart. Chapter 11. The weight of choice. The city awoke with a golden haze, the kind of morning light that made streets shimmer and promises feel tangible. Elias walked through the square, sensing a tension in the air that had nothing to do with weather. Traders moved briskly, eyes darting between parchments and coins, whispers carried from one merchant to another. Mr. Market flitted about, grinning, scowling, laughing, then sulking, all in the span of moments. The energy of the city was intoxicating, yet today it carried an undercurrent of unease. A new venture had emerged overnight, seemingly modest at first glance, a merchant offering rare spices from distant lands. But its allure was undeniable. The scent of cinnamon and cardamom seemed to drift through the square, drawing crowds as much by curiosity as by promise of profit. Traders pressed in, exchanging coins and parchments in a flurry of excitement. Elias watched carefully, analyzing every detail: supply sources, delivery routes, local competition, and the behavior of those flocking to invest. Then came the moral dilemma. The merchant confided in Elias privately, his voice low and urgent. "I have an opportunity," he said. "You can invest now at a small cost and reap enormous profit later, but some of my practices, well, they skirt the edges of the city's rules. Few will notice, but it could be risky in ways the public doesn't see." Elias froze. Every instinct told him that this venture had potential for great gain, yet something inside whispered caution. He thought of the glittering guilds that had collapsed, the panic of traders, and the lessons of the veterans. Intelligence without integrity could lead to ruin, not just financially but morally. The temptation was strong. A swift gain could accelerate his progress in the city, allowing him to experiment further with enterprising ventures. But the risk was not only in market forces, it was in trust, in ethics, and in the quiet whisper of conscience that, once ignored, could erode judgment more quickly than any panic. He recalled the keeper's words from long ago: observe, analyze, protect, endure. Intelligence must be tempered by wisdom. With a deep breath, Elias made his choice. He allocated only a tiny portion, enough to maintain connection and observe outcomes, but refused to compromise his principles. He would not chase wealth at the expense of judgment. As the day unfolded, the venture's path became clearer. The rare spices drew interest and demand surged, but whispers of impropriety spread quietly through the streets. Some traders, blinded by potential profit, ignored the warnings and suffered losses when oversight arrived unexpectedly. Elias's restrained position limited exposure, allowing him to benefit from growth without endangering integrity. Yet the lesson went deeper than finances. He realized that intelligence was not only about understanding markets, calculating risk, or diversifying investments. It was also about navigating the subtle currents of morality, trust, and human behavior. A misstep in judgment could destroy more than coins. It could erode reputation, clarity, and long-term opportunity. By nightfall, Elias returned to his room, exhausted but thoughtful. He reviewed his notes, not only on performance but on choices made, temptations resisted, and principles maintained. The city outside shimmered under lantern light, alive with whispered deals, quiet triumphs, and the ever-present pulse of Mr. Market's moods. Then, as he placed his quill down, a note appeared on the desk. Written in the familiar, precise hand of the hooded observer, it read, "True intelligence is tested not by profit alone, but by choice. The city offers fortune, but also corruption, distraction, and greed. Endure. Observe. Choose wisely." Elias felt the weight of the lesson settle on him. Knowledge, patience, and skill had brought him this far, but now he understood that true mastery required more: courage to resist temptation, clarity to discern right from wrong, and steadfastness in the face of subtle manipulations. He looked out the window at the city, lanterns reflecting in puddles from an earlier rain. The square was alive with energy, opportunity, and danger. Somewhere among the traders, Mr. Market watched, ever shifting, ready to tempt, test, or unsettle. Elias understood that the journey was nearing its climax. Final lessons awaited, challenges that would demand all the discipline, intelligence, and wisdom he had gathered. And in the shadowed corners, the hooded observer watched silently, pen moving across parchment, recording each choice, each hesitation, each flicker of conscience, waiting for the moment when Elias would face the ultimate test. Chapter 12. Mastery in the storm. The city was restless that morning, a restless tide of light, sound, and motion. Traders moved like currents, carrying hope, fear, and ambition with every step. Mr. Market hovered above the square, his mood shifting faster than the eye could follow, one moment joyous, the next sullen, then fierce with sudden panic. Elias stood at the edge of the square, parchment in hand, heart steady, his mind clear. Today would test everything he had learned. The events began subtly. A rumor spread that a distant venture, once considered secure, had faltered. Traders rushed to liquidate, coins clinking, papers exchanging hands frantically. The sirens of greed whispered promises of wealth for those bold enough to chase fleeting opportunity, while fear pushed others into panic. Elias watched calmly, recalling the keeper's cavern, the veteran's advice, and the lessons of every collapse he had endured. He reviewed his holdings, both defensive and enterprising, noting which ventures were resilient and which required careful attention. His fingers traced the lines of the map he had memorized, each token representing months of observation, calculation, and disciplined decision-making. He had learned patience, the margin of safety, the balance between opportunity and risk, and the importance of integrity in every choice. A sudden commotion erupted at the center of the square. A new, glittering venture had appeared, towers taller than any before, promises louder than any voice, potential riches dazzling to behold. Traders surged forward, a wave of frenzy fueled by desire and fear. Mr. Market's moods amplified the chaos, pulling traders into a storm of emotion, rumor, and speculation. Elias paused, breathing deeply. This was the moment he had trained for, the ultimate test of intelligence, patience, and judgment. He analyzed the venture carefully. It held promise, yes, but also instability, hidden dependencies, and exposure to forces beyond control. The city's currents tugged at him, the whisper of rapid gain tempting, yet he remembered the first collapse, the lessons from the veterans, and the weight of ethical choice. He acted decisively. Defensive holdings were reinforced, enterprising investments were measured and small, and he observed every reaction of Mr. Market and the crowd. Others fell into panic, some chasing brilliance without seeing the cracks, while a few maintained cautious steadiness. Elias moved among them, learning, noting, and adjusting, a quiet anchor in a stormy sea. Hours passed, the frenzy rising and falling like waves. Some ventures soared briefly, only to falter under the pressure of sudden events. Others endured, proving the strength of resilience, careful planning, and disciplined observation. Elias's choices, guided by intelligence and tempered by experience, allowed him to weather the chaos without ruin. He felt a strange exhilaration, the satisfaction not of sudden triumph, but of enduring wisdom applied perfectly in practice. As the sun set, the square fell into uneasy calm. Traders regrouped, Mr. Market's mood softened, and the glittering towers stood or collapsed according to the invisible rules of the city's currents. Elias looked over his holdings. Growth, stability, and knowledge had combined to carry him through the ultimate test. He had not chased every siren, panicked with every rumor, or abandoned discipline in pursuit of fleeting glory. He returned to his room, candlelight flickering over his maps and notes. For the first time, he felt a profound clarity. Intelligence, patience, judgment, and ethical consideration were not separate skills, they were one, woven together through experience and careful observation. The city had tested him in every way: risk, emotion, greed, and moral choice. And he had endured. A final note appeared at his desk, folded and precise as always. The hooded observer had written, "You have learned to survive storms, to balance opportunity with caution, to act with judgment and integrity. Intelligence is not only knowledge, but the discipline to apply it wisely. The city, Mr. Market, and the currents of human behavior will continue, but you have learned the way to navigate them." Elias read the note slowly, letting the words settle. He understood now that mastery was not a destination but a practice, a constant application of intelligence, observation, and judgment in a world of uncertainty. The city outside shimmered, alive with opportunity, danger, and potential. Mr. Market, ever unpredictable, continued to flit from group to group, mood shifting like storms on the horizon. And Elias, having endured, learned, and applied every lesson, stood ready, not to conquer the city, not to claim sudden wealth, but to move with steady wisdom through its endless currents, growing steadily, learning constantly, and navigating every challenge with intelligence and discipline. The journey had transformed him. Knowledge had become action, observation had become judgment, and patience had become strength. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside, Elias felt a quiet mastery, a calm clarity that no collapse, rumor, or temptation could unsettle. He had become the kind of investor the gatekeeper and the veterans had hinted at, one who survived storms, embraced opportunity carefully, and understood that true wealth lay not in dazzling triumphs, but in enduring wisdom applied through steady, intelligent action. The night fell, lanterns glowing like silent witnesses, and the hooded observer faded into the shadows, pen still moving, recording the story of a young man who had learned the ultimate lesson, that intelligence, patience, judgment, and integrity together create the power to endure and to thrive in a world ruled by uncertainty. Thanks for listening to this chapter on Momentum Mind. If you found this valuable, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss a new chapter. Now I want to hear from you. What audiobook should we explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments and let's continue building smarter habits together.